Exploring the bizarre. Your e-ticket ride into the world of the paranormal. Strap yourself in as we traverse the universe exploring the unexplained. UFOs, ghosts, lost worlds, cryptozoology, as well as other dimensions. It's time to take back the night. Now, your electrifying hosts of Exploring the Bizarre, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
Tim, what are we doing this far underground? It's like we're in some kind of Frankenstein factory. Oh, look, there seems to be an alien corpse on that examination table over there.
Well, glad you noticed it, Tim. You know, our guest tonight believes that eons ago, ancient aliens genetically engineered the human race, so we're kind of a lab rat pack. So I guess you could say we're trying to get even by back engineering some of their scientists, creating a race of ultra-terrestrial clones. Isn't that clever of me?
Oh, this is just too bizarre. It's a real freak show you have going on here. There's electricity lighting up everything. And what happens if one of those alien creatures comes alive and he's not so friendly?
That's why I have you here. Need all the protection we can get. Now, let me get back to my lab work. Tim, hand me a bucket of those nuts and bolts over there. Yeah. Oh, look at him. He is kind of twitching a little, isn't he?
Me.
Yeah. Oh, well, we'll get this figured out sooner or later. 3 more lightning bolts through the cranium, and he'll be all set. He might want to take over the show, though, come to think of it. We don't want that, do we?
No, yeah. The listeners definitely don't want that.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. Well, here we are, another jolly night, which is I look forward to this evening with great anticipation. And tonight we're going to have a wild and crazy show because we've got a wild and a great guest on. As always, we bring you the best in paranormal talk and paranormal entertainment. That's so right. What's going on there in Jasper, Indiana? Oh,
just another beautiful day in the neighborhood, Tim.
Well, there you go. You got a Mr. Rogers out there?
No, I'm Mr. Rogers. Well, got my sweater on and my house slippers, and I'm ready to go.
But I know you've been busy. What have you been working on?
Oh, well, we're working on our new book, which is about Area 51, and hopefully, no, not hopefully, we will. We'll get it out really soon. Should be ready to go in another week or so, I'd say.
Well, I hope so, because we want to get out to Rachel and join the stampede. But enough of our idle chatter, because we want to roll right along here. And so, Tim number 2, tell us who our guest is this evening and what we will be chattering about.
Oh, well, I'm very happy to say that tonight our guest is LON STRICKLER. Lon's been on the show a number of times, and we're always happy to have him with us to talk about just all these different Fortean subjects that are so near and dear to our heart. So now LON is a cryptid researcher and intuitive who writes and mentors on a variety of Fortean subjects. Now LON is a resident of Hanover, Pennsylvania, and at an early age he realized that he had the ability to sense spiritual energy and found this useful in the field while conducting investigations. Most of his early work concentrated on spiritual activity at historical locations in Maryland and Pennsylvania, in particular locations where traumatic events have occurred. Now, in 1981, LON experienced a Bigfoot encounter near Sykesville, Maryland, while fishing at the South Branch of the Patapsco River. You'll have to correct me on that, Ron, if I said that wrong. As a result of this incident, he included cryptid studies as an important part of his research. Now, Lon is the host of the webcast Arcane Radio, heard live Friday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern on paranormalking.com, and his latest book, which we'll be talking with him about tonight, is Alien Disclosure: Experiencers Expose Reality. So, Lon, thank you very much for being with us again on Exploring the Bizarre.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And Tim, you can see I'm a wild and crazy guy. It's all right.
Okay, well, very good. I've heard rumors from the cryptids in your neighborhood that they say that you're pretty out there, but that's good because that keeps them on their toes, and they've got some pretty big toes, all three of them. Lon, we think of you as the Bigfoot and Mothman man, but you're a lot more than that, and I think this new book shows that. I haven't had, I must admit, the pleasure of reading it yet, but why don't you tell us a little bit about what this is about? Because I guess it's not your typical let's get out and find Bigfoot.
Well, you guys know me long enough to know that if it's interesting, I'm going to try to get in on it and see what's going on. And, I guess you can say my forte has been cryptids and other unexplained beings and such, but the abduction and alien encounter genre kind of hit me right smack in the face back in 2010, 2011, when I started to talk to David Eckhart, who is an experiencer and abductee from around Pensacola, Florida. So I've been investigating the things that he's been going through now for almost a decade. And of course, being on the blog and, doing that almost every day, I do run into a lot of other experiencers and abductees as well. So I figured it was about time to go ahead and put about 2 decades worth of research into the book. And that's why I decided to write it.
And what would you say is the thrust of the book? What do you reveal to us?
Well, I believe that it's time for people who have actually had experiences to be heard and to be believed, because there's a stigma with people who have said they were abducted, and unless you really sit down and listen to them. And of course, I've also had experiences myself. It's I believe that is actually the time to start buying into what they're telling us, and but within reason. But I think they got a lot to offer to us, and I think the truth is actually coming from those who have experienced it.
Now, what I realize we only have an hour here. But what was your earliest experience? I mean, what do you gather from all of this, and who's taking you, and where did you go to?
Well, it actually started around 2015. I was, after decades of research, investigation, and then I had personal experience. I believe that an early interaction between Earth's inhabitants and otherworldly beings actually occurred. And I'm saying it happened around 13th to the 12th millennium BCE. I don't think it's the only interchange, but I think it's probably one of the most influential. As a result of me being able to remote view and actually do sessions with others, and then thinking and sure that I had 3 personal non-terrestrial encounters Only one was with a lost time event. But on one occasion, I was taken to a location. I don't know if it was on a craft or it was somewhere else entirely, but there were 3 tall grays. These were also the same trio of non-terrestrials who I actually encountered at home. Well, anyway, I was shown an historical scenario. It was displayed to me by them. In this scenario, I witnessed a colossal disc-shaped craft descend and land in the area of present-day Nile River Delta. Now, at that time, this location was completely encircled by the Mediterranean Sea, and that this craft was later transformed into a massive island. Now, this was the genesis of a great empire that encompassed the surrounding indigenous people and land. The rulers of this empire were the occupants of the craft that landed there. Their knowledge was disseminated throughout the region, and their bloodline merged with the native people. Now, the aliens communicated to me that this empire was the nexus of several dominant and lesser civilizations. And the first thing I asked them was this Atlantis? But there was no response to my question. I witnessed representations of various cultures that had developed over the millennia.
Now, was this on a screen that you saw this, or implanted in your mind?
It was a projection on a surface, a vertical surface. I don't know if it was a screen or what it was, but it was very clear. And as this image was shown to me, they were explaining to me by telepathy. I mean, I actually heard voices coming, I believe, from them in English telling me what was going on.
And now, did they tell you their point of origin, and why would they be? Okay, so they came here eons ago, right? Mm-hmm. Have they stayed around?
Oh yeah. Oh, they've been here. They've been here ever since they first came here. And like I said, I was told,
are they hiding? Are they hiding from us?
Oh, they're living among us. Yeah, it's pretty obvious to me after this and other work that I have done that they are definitely living among us and are integrated within our society.
Can we tell? Is there now you say they look kind of like these grays? Well, obviously they're not. If they were walking around and looking like that, we would be able to pick them out. But obviously they've camouflaged their appearance.
Yeah, they're able to shapeshift. They're either that they're engineered into a being that looks very, very human.
Mm-hmm. And why this particular interest? I mean, the universe is vast. Why would they say, let's land the over there on that little pebble in space?
I think a lot of it has to do with their being intrigued by the human species.
I know they want our women, but that's. I mean, we pointed that out in it. Yeah, we pointed that out in our book, "Screwed by the Aliens." Yeah.
The one thing I do believe after all this I've looked into is that for some reason I believe they're somewhat jealous of us. If you go back to the book of Enoch and you talk about the fallen angels and the such that they incorporated in with the human females and such, and the Nephilim and that whole story. But I do believe that they are jealous of the humans for one specific reason. We have the ability to be an esoteric being. In other words, we actually go on to another level after we pass. Mm-hmm. I don't think they're able to do that.
Is that right?
Yeah. I don't think they're able to do that.
Now, do they have, in a lot of these cases where people have been abducted, they talk about how non-emotional these creatures are, that they're almost like a hive of insects. Do they have a social structure outside of coming in and camouflaging themselves here? And
Well,
where who would they be? I mean, can we? I know we hear talk about certain bloodlines, and even the queen being a shapeshifter and a serpent. But I don't know as if I've necessarily believed in those stories or not. But you can never really tell what's possible and what's not. Oh.
well, when I started talking to David Eckhart about his abductions and his encounters, he had mentioned that when they started abducting him through a portal, now what they would do is they would open up a portal in his bedroom, and they would take he and his family through that. But for whatever reason, he still doesn't understand why. And it's been almost a decade now. Well, actually, it was long before I ever met him. It's almost 15 years. They were taking him to a location, and these were reptilian type beings, and there was always one reptilian who was involved with him. And as David used to say, he was just a grouch. He didn't really seem like he wanted to be there and do that, but he tolerated it because that was what he was supposed to do. And they would take him to a location initially that he believed was an huge underground cavern on Earth. And that this cavern was a type of mining operation, possibly a construction operation, because there were also there was also habitation by families and pods of other reptilians. So they basically ran the show. They were the overseers. They had other alien species there working for them. But the most horrifying thing was that there were a lot of humans there as well, and they were basically working as slave labor.
Oh boy, yeah. So you wouldn't say then that these guys are necessarily overly friendly.
No, not in his instance. I mean, he was shown a lot of different things, and in fact, he witnessed actual experimentation and disposal of humans. These
disposal?
These were human beings.
Disposal?
Well, they would take certain humans for experimentation, and he described it as there being a reptilian, I guess a doctor or a reptilian who would actually put these human on a table on its side and literally cut open the back, and they would reach in and pull out certain parts of the body, and when and they wouldn't die, they were not dead, and in fact he also was able to see this disposal of these humans as they literally walked up to this huge cylinder that was several stories high. They would jump into it and float down into an area where these, I don't know what they were, like long tubes or whatever, but they would actually go into these humans and take out all the moisture, and then they would float down into an incinerator. Like,
oh, geez.
Yeah.
Well, that kind of sounds like a level 7 at the Dulce base. Now, I know in the book that Scott Corrales did for us, the Alien Bloodlust, we even talk about human sacrifice. And there's one story that John Keel had related to me where a talk show personality, a lady from Long Island, her name is J.P. Peril. I don't know if she's still in the business or if she's even with us. But she went with these beings. Well, they were kind of ordinary looking, but they took her to this underground facility. But it looked like almost like a one of these storage units, in the suburbs. And there were people laid out there on medical slabs or tables, and they were drawing blood from the bodies of these humans. I guess a whole row of them. Very, very spooky. Here we just did a book on the Solar Council, the Air Chart Command, and we hear these great stories. Like Mark Brinkerhoff was on last week and talks about these friendly beings coming here from other worlds in space and this federation of planets. But boy, it does seem certainly that a lot of these guys are up to no good. And people always ask me, well, how do we know the good guys from the bad guys? And I said, well, I guess by their deeds show you know them. If they start, wanting to suck your blood or inviting you for dinner, probably you should avoid them, But now go ahead.
Well, David has also stated that not all of these humans were disposed of. Some were processed for food as well. He also saw that. I've been dealing with David now for a long time, and there's so much that I haven't talked about because I tried to present it in this book. I wouldn't say sanitized, but more. Yeah. More that to a point where you could understand what I was actually saying.
Have you had him? Have you had him on your show?
Yes, I have.
Oh, we'll have to try to get him on as a guest. I'm not. I've heard the name, but I'm not familiar with the experiences, and I would certainly call them, extreme. Now, some of these beings that you have investigated, I'm thinking of the Winged Wonders because you contributed some material to that book. Are they in any way related to these ultra-terrestrials?
They may be. I believe there are a lot of levels of non-terrestrial beings. If you're referring to the winged humanoids, in particular those we experienced in Chicago, I do believe those are interdimensional beings. I believe there's a possibility that they may be related somehow to aliens, but I really don't have any proof of that. That's why I didn't mention any of that in this book.
So,
all right, Tim, before you continue this question, we need to go to our bottom of the hour break. So when we come back, we'll continue our conversation with myself, Tim Beckley, and Lon Strickler on Exploring the Bizarre. So stay tuned.
Now back to Exploring the Bizarre with two of the most electrifying researchers in the paranormal, your hosts, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
Welcome back to Exploring the Bizarre. I'm Tim Swartz. Tonight we're talking with Ron Strickler and his new book, Alien Disclosure: Experiencers Expose Reality. So, Lon, I wanted to ask you, and I've broached this subject before, with all of the various experiences that people have had over the years, coming into contact with these, I'll say non-human entities, but we're not quite sure what they are. But with the exception of really just a few cases, the majority of these beings, these entities, they have a humanoid form. I mean, they have, 2 arms, 2 legs, they have a head, 2 eyes. They look so much like us. And if these are actual extraterrestrials, beings that evolved on a planet in another solar system someplace, why do they look so much like us? From what we know, at least our limited experience with life on Earth, you wouldn't think that something would evolve that would look so much like us. And in fact, a lot of times, so much like us that they, as you said earlier, they could actually intermingle with us.
And for that reason, I believe that the aliens or non-terrestrials that we see that are presented to us are actually evolved humans from the future or possibly the past. I think they are able somehow to come back, and it's been so much time since their existence and our existence. I think they evolved somehow. And I'm just not saying grays. I'm talking about several types of humanoid species.
Right. And, I mean, if our listeners don't realize this, there's a whole pantheon of humanoids seen coming out of UFOs. I mean, you have the grays, which really are just kind of a recent entry in the whole UFO field. Before we have the Space Brothers, which were tall, Nordic-looking types of beings, but you also have giants and midgets, little people, what have you. I mean, you could write a whole book on just all of the different types of creatures seen that are involved with the UFO phenomena.
Yeah, I mean, there are various forms. They're usually humanoid, but there have been some cases where they are a little bit different than humanoid. I if you read the book, you'll remember the sighting of this blobbish-looking being. Possibly it was two of them in an area near Phoenix in Surprise, Arizona, where this woman had actually seen these two entities out her window, staring into the window. They just looked like blobs, but they had a human form. She didn't notice any legs, but that's probably the most different or non-humanoid type being that I've ever been told about or have talked to an experiencer about.
And of course, it has been presented by a number of different researchers that when we do see these beings, we may not be necessarily seeing them in their actual form.
That's true.
Yeah, that they either are able to project an image into our minds or actually physically shapeshift.
Well, I actually believe that the alien beings that were presented to the early Egyptians were actually presented to them in the humanoid form, but with the heads of animals. As such, what their religion calls, their deities. Their deities are these human animal mix. I believe a lot of that are chimeras, if you want to call them that. I believe they were presented to them like that because it would be much more easier to to get them to kind of come along with the program. I guess that's what you would say.
Well, and of course, as you said at the beginning of your book, I mean, we've had contacts with these beings, whatever they are, for a very long time, and in fact, they may have been responsible for us being here on this planet. So, I mean, it could be the reason that they look so much like us is because they are us.
Yeah, and we've heard for years about the missing link. Well, the missing link might be something other than what an evolved human. It may be an actual intervention of an alien.
One of the things that from your book that a lot of these cases involves just some really high strangeness events that are almost well, I mean, they really are. I mean, they seem to have a paranormal a feature about them. I mean, you have these people, and that's one of the things I love about your book is that, I mean, these are the actual experiences from people who, I mean, you did not go out and solicit and offer to pay for these stories. These people came to you and brought them to you as they actually remember it. But so many of these events, I mean, while people are going through them, you could almost interchange extraterrestrials, aliens, what have you, for ghosts and spirits.
Yeah, that does happen. And in fact, when I first met David Eckhart, I wasn't sure if he was dealing with aliens or not because of some of the stuff he was telling me. It sounded like spirit activity.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, he did have the photographic evidence and some of the some other instances. He had a video with the sounds that were so eerie-like, and but I had to basically, for the first 4 or 5 months of talking with him, I had to kind of clear it being, cleared out of being, actual spirit activity at first. So when I was finally convinced that it wasn't, then we went forward. But no, I actually did believe it may have been.
Dr. Leo Sprinkle, he speculated, and in fact, he had witnesses that he had put under hypnosis, who had basically told him that these he called them extraterrestrials. Actually, their science involved using what we would call the paranormal or supernatural forces. Of course, their technology is so far advanced that what we would call paranormal now is nothing more than science for them. But the way that they are able to travel from location to location involves basically shifting out of the material world and into the astral planes and back again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that is a distinct possibility, and I do believe that most of the travel, most of the means of getting here are not through interstellar travel on craft. I believe it's a wormhole or some type of gateway between either parallel worlds or parallel universes, or even possibly other planets. Who's to say that these alien beings that present themselves to us are not actual residents of a parallel world to Earth?
Exactly. And I mean, that was something that, I referred to, at the beginning of this segment, and whether or not our perception of the universe and this reality is I don't want to say wrong, but I mean, we just we're just not really aware of how the universe actually exists and our place in it, and whether or not these beings that we would call extraterrestrials aren't, like you said, dimension, time, space. I mean, that those are terms that to them are probably meaningless, and they're able to travel into areas of this universe that, I mean, our minds just aren't made to conceive it.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, there's so much we need to learn. I mean, we can sit here and discuss what we think these things are. We can write books about it based on what other people have said has happened. But until there's more proof and more evidence, we're kind of, left to our own devices on this.
Well, it's like our ancestors climbing a tree and throwing rocks at the moon.
Absolutely.
We're kind of in that position right now. We're lighting candles to keep the darkness away and all the things that occupy those dark corners.
Right.
So, from the cases that that you have in this book, is there one or a couple in there that really stand out to you as as this being, oh wow, this is really significant. I'm glad I have this in this book.
Well, the one case that probably deeply affected me more than any was an encounter and later abduction of a woman in Washington State. And this was presented to me before I even met David Eckhart. Mm-hmm. This woman's name was Mandy. She gave me a call in July 2009. She stated to me that her life had become a living hell, that she could no longer leave her house in the evening. And she told me she's literally afraid of the dark and under siege in her own home at night. She lived in a farmhouse in a small town in east central Washington, less than a mile from the Idaho border. About 2 weeks prior to contacting me, her and her mother had noticed bright red and white lights hovering above the Coeur d'Alene Mountains in Idaho. They could see it at a distance. And as they watched the lights, Mandy began feeling dizzy and fearful. That night, she had a horrific nightmare that involved constant flashing lights and loud mechanical noises. The next morning, she woke feeling nauseous and lightheaded. She's a teacher, so she had to call in sick. Now, by the next day, Mandy began to feel better, but the lights over the mountains continued on for several nights. She no longer had any dreams, but she still had this sense of fear lingering with her. Her mother thought that she was just simply reacting. Then a few nights later, her and her mother were in the kitchen cleaning up after a late dinner. They began hearing popping sounds coming from the backyard. And as they looked out the window, they both noticed hundreds of red and white lights flying in all directions. Each time a pair of these lights would collide, there'd be a distinct popping sound. So Mandy ran into the living room and looked out the window, and there were red and white lights everywhere by the road and in the field across the road. Her mother picked up the telephone in order to call the police, but there was no dial tone. By that time, the lights in the house began to flicker. There were also strange sounds coming from the roof, similar to scratching sounds. This continued for about 5 minutes and suddenly stopped. They were both confused and scared. The phone was now working. So her mother decided there was no sense to even try to call the police. Mandy walked outside to see if there was any indication of what occurred, but everything seemed fine other than a slight odor in the air that she described as smelling like burnt motor oil. Now, by the next night at approximately 10:30 p.m., Mandy was getting ready for bed. While standing in front of her bathroom mirror, she noticed two loud thuds on the roof. Mm. She went into her mother's room to see if she had heard the sounds, but she was fast asleep. And while walking in the upstairs hallway towards her room, she heard several more thuds in the roof, as well as scampering sounds in the attic. She looked out her bedroom window and once again witnessed hundreds of small red and white lights flying about in different directions. The noises had then awakened her mother. They both yelled for each other as all the electricity just suddenly cut off. They ran into Mandy's room and sat nervously in bed. The thuds on the roof and the scampering in the attic continued. This went on for about an hour. Then suddenly the lights came back on and the noises stopped. Mandy later told me this commotion went on for at least an hour. Neither of them got much sleep that night. So a few days later, Mandy called me by telephone. I was referred to her by a paranormal investigator in Spokane. As soon as I began talking to Mandy and her mother, I sensed that this wasn't a run-of-the-mill unexplained encounter. They had once again experienced similar activity the previous night. Mandy commented that she felt like they were both in danger and asked if I had heard of similar experiences. I was kind of dumbfounded, but I was sure that this may eventually lead to physical intervention, but I didn't mention anything, which I don't know. Maybe I should, but I believe that we talked about 3 hours a night, and there was nothing exceptional about her and her mother. They had lived there since Mandy was born, and she just wanted to know, why is this happening to us? Why? I thought they were probably being singled out, but then again, I didn't want to scare them. And, but little did I know that would be my last contact with Mandy.
Mm.
After I got off the telephone with Mandy and her mother, I started to examine several incidents in my database looking for an answer. The next day, I expected to receive a follow-up telephone call from Mandy. And in fact, I called and left a message asking her, to let me know if there had been any further activity. I waited for 3 days and no phone call or any email. Then on a Sunday afternoon, the anticipated call came. It was Mandy's mother. She apologized for not getting back to me. There was an obvious distress in her voice, and after a brief pause, she called me and said, Mandy is missing.
Mm.
I got a sudden sick feeling in my stomach. Mandy had gone to bed not long after we had talked on the telephone. Her mother remained downstairs in the living room watching television, and about 11 p.m. she decided to go up into her room. So as she passed Mandy's bedroom, she noticed light coming from the bottom of her door. She knocked on the door in order to check on her, and there was no response. So as she opened the door, the room was completely dark. She flicked on the light switch by the door and observed that Mandy was not in bed. She called out to Mandy, but there was no response. Panic began to set in as she literally screamed Mandy's name while running throughout the house. There was no trace of her. She was gone. The local authorities had no explanation. All Mandy's personal items, including her car, remained. She just simply vanished, and since she was an adult, there really wasn't much that the police could do about it. They suspected she just took off with someone. And, at this point, Mandy has never returned home. Mm-hmm. And the last time I made an inquiry with the Washington State Police, her case remains unsolved. So Mandy's disappearance, it still haunts me.
Was her car still there? Or
yeah, she left her car, all her effects and everything.
Jesus, right off of one of these missing people shows, or missing 911, 949.
Well, I tell you,
yeah.
I had a lot of guilt because of that. I really did seriously think about not taking any more experiencer cases as far as possible alien abduction and such. And the stigma has kind of always remained with me, but I decided that it wasn't going to help anybody if I, just went ahead and just told people I wasn't going to listen to what they had to say. Mm-hmm. So, but that one has stuck with me.
Well, and I bet that the phenomena ceased after she disappeared.
Oh yeah, I haven't heard a thing about any of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's and I mean, with the exception of the person actually disappearing and never showing up, the events leading up to that are so similar. I mean, so similar to many of the other cases that you have in your book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and at first, like when she first started telling me about the sounds and stuff in the attic, and first thing I thought, well, maybe this is paranormal. Maybe this is spirit activity. Mm-hmm. And like you said, and in some cases, it does kind of resemble that. But I just had this knot in my stomach and this thought that, this is something different. This may get bad. So unfortunately, it did turn out that way.
All right. Well, all right, Lon, we have about 3 minutes left in the show, unfortunately. And so why don't you let our listeners know where they can find you online, your blog, your radio show, and your book, where they can find that?
Well, my website is phantomsandmonsters.com. It's a blog, but I have a lot of other information there. I do put out a free... I do put out a free newsletter each day. You just sign up for it, and it'll be in your mailbox. I've written 7 books. The last one, as you said, was Alien Disclosure, Experiencers Expose Reality. It's available on Amazon. All you got to do is just search my name, LON STRICKLER, and it'll come up. And I have a radio show, which is on each Friday night at 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. It's called Arcane Radio, and we tackle a lot of the subjects that I examine.
All right. Well, and I just want everyone to know that I highly recommend all of Lon's books. They're all just fantastic. Your latest one is just incredible. I enjoyed it, and there's just a lot of mystifying cases in it. And Tim, hopefully we'll have the Area 51 book out in no time, long before the actual
the stampede. I was just reading here that the town of Nye is not looking forward to the people showing up for the Rock Fest. I can never understand this. People want to have a good time, and even if so there might be a little garbage on the. There's no lawns out there. What are they talking about? The kids will move the rocks around a little. The old folks will drink beer and alcohol, and the youngsters will smoke pot. And so big whoopee. Who knows what the aliens will do? They'll be hanging out there. I'm sure. It should be a rather interesting affair, and it certainly will get a lot of coverage. Don't forget our YouTube channel, Mr. UFO's Secret Files, and go to Amazon.com and type in Interlight-Global Communications, and you'll see 400 books.
At least.
All written by me and Tim, yes. All right.
Thank you, Lon. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody. Good night, Tina. Good night, Helen. Good night, Carol. Good night, Peter. Good night, Mrs. Calabash, wherever you are.
You've been listening to Exploring the Bizarre with hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz. They're taking back the night by jetting non-stop across the cosmos in search of the truly bizarre and totally unexplained, with you as their co-pilot. Thursday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern, on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. For more information on Exploring the Bizarre and hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz, check out their KCOR Digital Radio Network page. Follow their YouTube channel at MRUFO 1100. Exploring the Bizarre.